So with a lot of new people coming back into Elden Ring with Shadow of the Erdtree on the horizon, I thought I would build the top 5 best beginner builds for you guys that you can get at the beginning of the game and just use that weapon, and they're very beginner friendly all the way until you beat the game. All these builds are going to be very viable, and they're going to do a decent amount of damage. This is not going to be anything crazy overpowered because I want these builds to be very new game player accessible. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into the video. So for all these builds that you're about to see, they've all been recorded on New Game Plus 6. I'm not even using close to the best talismans in the game because I wanted to keep everything very user friendly and new player friendly, but as you can see, you are going to be doing a decent amount of damage. So for this build, we're going to be using the Axe of Godrick. It's a very fantastic weapon that you're going to attain from Godrick's Remembrance, who's one of the first real big bosses of the game. However, you are going to get this very early, right after Stormveil Castle, so you can play with this weapon through the entire game. This weapon has absolutely fantastic quality scaling, which means strength and dexterity stats, and you are going to be able to put a really decent amount of damage out with not only the Ash of War, but the heavy charged R2s that we're going to be using with this build. Now, this build is incredibly user-friendly and beginner-friendly because the Ash of War is incredible, and you don't need to do a whole lot in order to make this weapon very viable. We have a few talismans that are going to stack well with this weapon, as well as some quality of life talismans that are going to keep you from taking a lot of damage, as well as adding to your stamina recovery speed, allowing a much quicker recovery time when it comes to this massive axe. Although the Ash of War is not chargeable, you are going to be able to deal 19 stance damage per hit, and it's going to allow you to break stances a lot quicker, getting some really nice critical damage off. I think overall this build is a lot of fun and definitely needs to be tried out for those who are looking for a new build to get back into Elden Ring. So for this build, we're going to be using the Axe of Godrick and whatever armor you would like. I recommend you get over the 51 poise mark just so you're not staggered as often. And for your talismans, you're going to be wearing the Axe Talisman, the Warrior Jar Shard or Shard of Alexander, the Green Turtle Talisman, and the Dragon Crest Shield Talisman. For your flask, you use the Dexterity Knot Crystal Tier just to boost our dex up a little bit more and give us more damage, and also the Green Burst Crystal Tier because this build does eat stamina a little bit. Now for this next build, we're going to be using the Bloodhound's Fang. You can't have an early game or beginner build without mentioning this weapon. This is an absolutely fantastic dexterity or quality weapon if you decide to go that way, and we are going to be equipping Blood Flame Blade as well as this phenomenal weapon to absolutely destroy every single boss in the game. This is hands down one of the best weapons in the entire game, and the fact that you can get it in Limgrave almost as soon as you start is absolutely ridiculous. You're going to be doing a crazy amount of damage, not only with the Ash of War Bloodhound's Finesse, which is also incredible, but the regular strikes and heavy charged R2 from this weapon absolutely decimate everybody. You can break stances very easily, even though that's not what we're going for in this build, but with the Blood Flame Blade incantation, you're also going to be building up hemorrhage very quickly because this weapon also has innate bleed on the weapon, allowing you to continually build up that hemorrhage and get those massive chunks of blood loss off. Now, it needs to be stated, just because there are going to be beginners watching this video, the Bloodhound's Finesse Ash of War is actually a 2-part Ash of War. You have to hit the Ash of War button twice. The first one is going to flip you backwards. The second one is going to teleport you forwards, dealing massive damage. It took me way too long when I first started this game to figure that out, so I wanted to make sure people knew ahead of time so that if they did pick up this weapon and didn't know how to use it effectively, that is exactly how it's done. But this build is incredibly new game friendly. It's a fantastic weapon to get, and you definitely can carry it all the way through the entire game. I know the end bosses are immune to bleed, but you do a ton of physical damage with this weapon as well, and between the talismans and flasks and the weapon with this build, we're going to be putting out a ton of damage, having a great time doing it, and you're going to have a really easy time through the lands between. So for this build, we're going to be using the Bloodhound's Fang and the Clawmark Seal for our buff Blood Flame Blade. For armor, you can use whatever you would like to, and for your talismans, since I wanted to keep this very beginner friendly, I have the Green Turtle Talisman, the Warrior Jar Shard, the Crimson Amber Medallion to raise our HP, as well as the Wing Sword Insignia. Now, as you progress through the game, if you don't kill Alexander and want to replace this talisman with something different, eventually you'll get the Shard of Alexander, and you can change out the Wing Sword Insignia eventually into Milson's Prosthesis. And for your flask, you're going to be using the Dexterity Knot Crystal Tier as well as the Green Burst Crystal Tier. You can see the stats on the right side of the screen. I'm level 170, but take all the faith out of this except for 13 for Blood Flame Blade, and you should be right around 150, and these are the stats that you should use. Now for this next build, we're going to be using one of my all-time favorite weapons and statuses. We're going to be using the Zamor Curve Sword, which has innate frost buildup on the weapon. Frost is incredibly overpowered all through the entire game. You can get a 20% damage buff to your enemies by letting them take 20% less damage anytime Frost is procced. You also are going to get a massive chunk of frost that gets taken off the second it is procced, and it is overall a crazy fun build to use. We're going to be using a ton of talismans that are going to be boosting our poise, our charged R2s, as well as the Zamor Ice Storm Ash of War, and give us a little bit more damage, as well as boost our stats entirely. I really enjoyed how this build came out, especially because we're not even using talismans that are great at the end of the game. This is a perfect beginner frost build, doing a ton of damage, as well as being incredibly easy to use. With that being said, you are going to want to play around the heavy charged R2s for the sole reason of this weapon has a unique charged R2. Its first swing is going to give you a solo swing, and then if you wind up again, you will get a double swing off. It can do a lot of damage and cripple a lot of enemies quickly, allowing you to get those nice criticals off and then use the Zamor Ice Storm Ash of War to absolutely obliterate everyone. So for this build, we're going to be using the Zamor Curve Sword. You can use whatever armor you would like. For our talismans, we're using the Radagon Sword Seal. We're also going to be using the Warrior Jar Shard, the Bullgoat Talisman, as well as the Axe Talisman. If you don't kill Alexander at the beginning and do his whole quest line, you can actually get the Shard of Alexander, which is going to be a little bit better than this one. For your flask, you're going to use the Dexterity Knot Crystal tier and the Spike Crack tier, and all of this is going to synergize very well to give you a nice pseudo stance break build with over 51 poise. And guys, real quick, if you're enjoying the content, thank you so much for being here. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification before you head out. It means a ton and it helps out the channel a lot. If you have beginner builds that you think should be in this video, or that you want the community to know about, or if you just want to help some new players, leave it down in the comments below. So with that being said, let's go ahead and continue the video. So for our next build, we're going to have the Lordsworn's Greatsword. This is a greatsword you can get literally at the beginning of the game by the third site of grace you go to within Limgrave. It's going to be very decent for you, having a great critical strike rating at 110 and also some very decent physical damage for the beginning and middle of the game. You can take this all the way until the end of the game if you would like to, but you will find some better greatswords on your travels, so this is a great one to get you started, and the build is an awesome jumping off point for any greatsword weapon type that you want to put with this particular build. But as of right now, we are going to be using a few talismans that are going to allow us to get some really great charged R2s off. Also, this weapon comes with Stamp Upward Cut as its Ash of War, which can be incredibly overpowered, especially with small and medium-sized enemies, knocking them super high up into the air. A great strategy for this build is to use Stamp Upward Cut, knock your enemy on the ground, and then charge that heavy R2 and smash them and break their stance. It works all the time. You're going to get great criticals off with this weapon, and you're going to have a lot of fun playing, and there's definitely nothing wrong with a good old greatsword in Elden Ring. I personally do think that greatswords are one of the best beginner-friendly weapons that you can use in all of Elden Ring. Now, if you're going to go through this game and switch out to a different greatsword continuing on this greatsword journey, I would switch out to something along the lines of the Iron Greatsword, or possibly the Banished Knight's Greatsword, considering you can get that also very early in the game in Caelid. So for this build, we're going to be using the Lordsworn's Greatsword, as well as whatever armor you would like. For talismans, we have the Dragon Crest Shield Talisman, we also have the Warrior Jar Shard, the Green Turtle Talisman, as well as the Axe Talisman. Now for your flask, we're going to use the Strength Knot Crystal tier, as well as the Spike Crack tier, to give us a full build synergy. The stats are over on the right side of the screen, but you won't have any faith if you do a 150 build. I want you to know that I have not added any buffs to any of the gameplay that you have seen, so what you see is what you're going to get. So for our very last build, we are also going to be using a weapon that you can find within your first half hour of gameplay. If you traverse down to Weeping Peninsula, you're going to find a broken down carriage, and in the back of that carriage is going to be the Morning Star. We've created a build that's built around stance breaks, and you are absolutely going to obliterate everybody in Elden Ring. Typically, it takes 2 to 3 hits with a heavy charged R2 to stance break a boss, and with the Morning Star, you're also going to get some blood buildup on there as well, which is just a little bit of icing on the cake with this build. This build allows you to start with a regular stance break build, but if you decided to, you could add Frost to the Morning Star, or you could continue into Hemorrhage and put on something like the White Mask in the Lord of Blood's Exaltation later down the road. I feel like this weapon definitely gets forgotten, but it is a very good weapon, especially at the beginning and the middle of the game. And to make the weapon even better, we have put the Cragblade Ash of War onto it in order to give us some crazy poise damage and stamina damage, allowing us to break stances even quicker. I promise when using this weapon, if you just rely on those heavy charged R2s, you're going to have one of the easiest times possible getting through the lands between. So for this build, you're going to be using the Morningstar with Cragblade in order to make those stance breaks incredibly easy. For armor, you can wear whatever you would like, but the Omen Smirk mask gives you some extra strength, so you might want to take that into account. For our talismans, we're going to be using the Axe Talisman, the Wingsword Insignia, the Erdtree's Favor, and the Green Turtle Talisman. And for your flask, you're going to use the Stone Barb Crack tier and the Spike Crack tier. All of this is going to make stance breaks incredibly easy, and you're going to have a ton of fun with this build. And guys, that's going to be it for our top 5 best beginner builds for anybody who is just starting out in Elden Ring. If you guys enjoyed the video, once again, make sure to subscribe on your way out. I'm super pumped for the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, and I cannot wait to share that content with you guys to continue this longevity in life of Elden Ring. So, with that being said, thank you guys so much once again, and until next time, stay safe, enjoy the game, and I'll see you in the next one.